Hi everyone, it is time again for another Sew Your Stash update. If you're not familiar with Sew Your Stash, it is a challenge I started at the beginning of last year to try to use those fabrics and sewing supplies that we all have had hanging out in our sewing spaces for entirely too long. So it's to encourage us to look first at our stash and see what we can use from it for new projects before we go out and buy new fabrics or new supplies. Or in my case, to stop buying every single pretty fabric that I like but have zero plans to use. I'm going to have a playlist of all of these Sew Your Stash videos linked down below in the description box, so if you want to see more information about the challenge as well as my updates, you can check them all out down there. Last year I did really great at Sew Your Stash, and then I got a little bit off track, and I talked about that in my last update video that you can find in that playlist. So I was trying to re-motivate myself and get back on track with sewing from my stash. So I decided to add one more goal to my personal list of goals for the challenge. And that is because I have more than 300 commercial sewing patterns. So I decided to add the goal of using more of my sewing patterns because prior to this summer I had only used about 20 something of the patterns, and that is not even a drop in the bucket compared to all 300. I have a ton of patterns that are either vintage or vintage reproduction, and since I'm trying to transition my wardrobe and my style over to more of a vintage inspired style, I thought this would be the perfect time to make some things for myself that fit into my new clothing style, as well as be working toward goals from this challenge. So I think I've done pretty well at this new goal, and I'm going to share everything that I have made this summer using patterns from my stash. I did want to mention that I don't have a ton of fabrics in my stash that are either for clothing, or the ones that I do have that are clothing type fabrics, I don't have a lot of yardage of them. So in several of the cases I did have to go out and purchase fabrics. A few of the times I purchased fabric and a pattern. So not every project is a success on the Sew Your Stash scale. But I did do a lot of sewing, a lot of things that I'm really happy with the outcome of, and I think overall I'm working in the right direction for this goal. I also did succeed in using some fabrics from my stash for mock-ups for some of these. So even though the finished garment is not necessarily stash fabric, sometimes the mock-up was stash, and that still counts. So anyway, let's get on to talking about the different projects that I have made. I do already have videos about a lot of these, so I will link down below in the description box to all of the projects that I have a separate video about in case you want more information on it. But the first thing I did this summer was I made a Jedi costume for myself. I have already made Jedi costumes for the girls. Jeremiah already has a Jedi costume, and I figured it was time to have my own. We belong to a local group called Jedi OKC, and we dress up in costumes for different events like movie releases or for charity events. So it's a lot of fun, and I wanted to have my own costume now. So I started off by using Simplicity 5840. This is the pattern that we had used for Jeremiah's costume. And then I also picked up McCall's 7696 to use for the pants. And the reason I selected this pattern, honestly, is because it has pockets, and that ended up being my favorite part of this costume, so I'm really glad that I went with this pattern. This is a stash pattern. This is a newly added pattern, and I had been kicking around the idea of making this costume, but I didn't really know what to use. I knew I would have to buy fabrics for it because I didn't have anything that was going to work for it. And I was walking through Walmart one day, and I went through the fabric area, and I saw some homespun fabrics. They were beautiful, and they were very affordable. They only had a few different colors, and I selected a really dark navy homespun fabric. And I decided that was what I wanted to use because I thought it would have a nice light flowy look to it, and then for events that are in the colder months I can just add like thermals or whatever underneath. So I selected that navy fabric, Then I also selected a dark gray fabric that has cross hatching on it for the pants, the tabards, the obi, and the dicky. So I whipped that costume up in just a few days and I absolutely love it. I even added hidden snaps in the obi and the tabards and the jacket, tunic, whatever, so that I could snap the things in place, so while I'm wearing it I'm not having to worry about this strap falling down or my belt sliding around or anything like that. So it's really comfortable to wear and it's really easy to wear, and I'm so happy with it. And I think that was one of the big things that motivated me to do more garment sewing, was because that project was such a success, and I have not sewn a whole lot of wearable things for myself lately, and since that one went so well, it really encouraged me toward this goal of sewing more patterns for my stash, because that one was such a win. And it wasn't planned, but I actually did get the costume finished in time to wear to the Solo movie premiere event. The next thing I made was a dress for Peyton. She is obsessed with orca whales right now, and we found a fabric at Joann's that is an orca whale print, and as soon as she saw it she was in love and she asked me if I would make something for her. So we had to buy it, and I said yes, I would make something for her, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to make. I was thinking a skirt or a dress, I wasn't sure, and I knew I wanted the shape of the dress. When I finally decided on a dress, I wanted the shape of it to somehow reflect orca whales, not just in the print but in the design as well. So then I was looking through my stash and I saw this pattern, McCall's 6310, and the shape right here where the yoke joins the bodice really resembles a whale tail. Like, as soon as I saw that I was like, wow, that makes me think of a whale tail. I know that's a silly thought to have, but I did. And so I used this pattern to make the dress for Peyton. This is a stash pattern, and unfortunately I only have it in one size, size 4, which is about a size too big, but that's okay because Peyton will be able to wear the dress for quite some time, and it turned out beautifully and I love it. I did use some interfacing and some other fabrics from my stash to go along with the orca fabric that we purchased. I do have a step-by-step tutorial for this pattern that's down below in the description box, and Peyton loves her dress so much. She asks to wear it like all the time, and I am so thrilled with it. Next up is Simplicity 8654. I used this pattern along with the fabric that I got in last October's So Haley Jane box to make the flowy shorts. It turned out well. I did a whole separate pattern review on this one where I talked about my thoughts on it, what I would change, and all that stuff, so definitely go check that out. But I'm happy with it overall, and I think it was a really fun project because this is a style I've never sewn before, and it is also, the fabric I used is one that I haven't really worked with before, so it was a really great learning experience as well as using fabric and pattern from my stash. The next pattern that I ended up using was Simplicity 8446. I sort of used it. I made a BB-8 skirt that is a poodle skirt inspired project, but instead of a poodle, it's BB-8. And it's a full circle skirt with the shaped waistband from this pattern. The waistband piece is actually the only thing I ended up using from this pattern, but it still counts. But as for this pattern on a whole, I wouldn't recommend it. I don't like how things are sewn. I don't like how the pockets are done. I don't like the placement of them. I don't like how the zipper is inserted. But I did use this. I do recommend this pattern only for the waistband piece, and that's what I used. Still counts. I used gray curtains for my stash that a friend had given me to make both a mock-up of the skirt and the final skirt. So 2 large curtains got used from my stash for one project. Then I made my rose dress from Butterick 6094, and this was a rare occasion that I bought the fabric and the pattern at the same time. I was at a fabric store that was going out of business, and I saw this rose print fabric and I fell in love with it, and I knew that I needed to make a fairly fitted kind of like 50s, 60s pinup kind of inspired dress. And so I immediately went over to the pattern cabinets and went hunting through the books and the patterns and everything until I found this pattern. I, of course, love big skirted dresses, but I knew for this fabric, a big skirt was not going to work. It needed to be the slimmer fitted skirt. And I am so happy I picked this pattern, and I really enjoyed this project. It was one, though, that I was kind of afraid to cut into the fabric because I bought every bit of it there was, and the store was closing, so there was zero chance of getting any more fabric if I messed up. And there were things about this pattern that I was really not sure about. I wasn't sure on the fit and a few of the steps, because there's an invisible zipper that I've never done before. There's the contrast area in the back that flips over, and just things that I wanted to make sure that I got them done right. So I did make a mock-up for this one. I used some curtains I had been given a while back that were stashed fabric. So that was a really good learning experience because it gave me the chance to get comfortable with the pattern before I cut into the super nice fabric that I did not want to mess up. And I'm really happy with how the overall dress turned out, and I am very glad that I did the mock-up, and I have videos on both versions of the dress on my channel. Then last up is Simplicity 8447, and this is a pattern that I see myself using quite a bit. I've already used it one time to make the trousers. I want to make the dungarees view, but I didn't have enough fabric yet, so I decided to go ahead and make the trousers as a practice run, and to make sure that the hip and waist measurements were going to work for me. So I used this awful fabric from my stash. I bought it a few years ago at the thrift store for like $2 or $2.50, and at the time I was like, this is the ugliest fabric in the world. It's an orangey brown color. It is awful. But it was so cheap. It was like 6 yards of fabric for just a couple bucks. So I had to get it. And I thought, well, if anything, I'll use it for practicing stuff or for lining something, or, you know, anything like that where it wouldn't show. So I thought, why not use it to make a pair of pants? If they don't work out, whatever, I'll throw it out. If it does work out, maybe I could pair it with the right thing and make it look okay. And it turns out that ugly orangey brown fabric doesn't look half bad as a pair of pants. So I made the trousers already. Eventually I would get around to making the dungarees. And I, since making the trousers, have drafted my own version of this pattern because I want to make a pair of 1940s inspired jeans. And it doesn't look like it on the pattern, but these pants fit really loose in the legs, like really loose, because they are meant to be worked in, and you need a lot of movement room and everything. So I have drafted my own version of the pattern that is a little more fitted in the legs to be 1940s inspired jeans. Then I made a version from my own pattern using a thin gray corduroy fabric that I had in my stash. I got it years and years ago for like $5, and I didn't realize until I unrolled it to use it to make my practice pair of pants that it had slashes in it, and each time you went around the roll, the slash got bigger. So it's just started out as a little slash, and by the end of it, it's like this long. So it's really a good thing I decided to use it to make a mock-up, because I don't think it really would have been usable for other kinds of projects. So I made the practice pair of the jeans using that gray corduroy fabric, and then I wanted to make something else. So I found a pair of denim in my stash that I've had for a while, and it wasn't enough for pants, but I realized it was enough for shorts. So I did make a pair of denim shorts using my drafted pattern and that bit of denim. They turned out absolutely awesome, and I love wearing these shorts so much. I am so glad that I thought of making shorts from my jeans pattern. I'm really looking forward to getting some more denim so that I can make the 1940s jeans that I'm wanting to make that will look pretty similar to the shorts that I've already finished, but instead of the red top stitching, I'm going to be doing the traditional gold top stitching that most jeans have. Now, I did want to talk about my pattern fail. I did have one fail, and it was really recently, so I didn't want you to think that everything I make turns out fabulous and I'm this super awesome sewer, because sometimes I have complete flops and I usually just don't show that. One of the flops was the original version of the BB-8 skirt. It was a horrible fail. That's why it turned into a mock-up, because it was not wearable. The other fail is Simplicity 2311. This is a 1940s vintage pattern. And I was trying to make view 3, which should have been a very simple project. I didn't read the instructions before I started, and then I read the instructions and saw that it was supposed to have bound buttonholes, which I have never done in my life. So I was just going to do sewn buttonholes, and that was going to be fine. And the other thing is that this pattern is one size too small. Well, sort of. It's one size smaller than my bust size. It is 2 sizes smaller than my waist size. I measured the pattern pieces and I thought it was going to be plenty large enough, but apparently my math was off. And even though I left out 2 of the darts, which gave me an extra inch of space in the waist, it still was not big enough. Yeah, it was much smaller than I thought it would be. I had tried to do French seams on it because I was using a thin fabric. Here's the fabric. It is semi-transparent. And so I was doing French seams to finish off the seam allowances nicely so it wouldn't fray. But I didn't want to do serging because serging might show. I didn't want to do bias binding because it might show. But the way the sleeves are, they are just attached to the top. So everything got super bulky right here where the French seam was. Then the fact that the waist was too small, I tried to let out 2 more of the darts, but it was going to rip the fabric. And then the facing for the neckline was too small as well. So even though it should have fit the opening, I don't know what happened there. But it was just, everything was just not working out. So I finally just gave up on it. Because I had plans, I had started on a Friday. I was going to vlog the process and everything and make it in like one day and wear it on Sunday. But it just wasn't working out, but I was determined to sew something that day. I abandoned the polka dot shirt project, and that's when the idea popped in my head to make the denim shorts. And I started in and I made the shorts in 5 hours, and yeah, so it turned out to be a huge success because I did make a garment that I really loved, but it wasn't the one that I started. So technically I used more stash, but it kind of just went to waste. But thankfully I only paid $1 for this fabric at the thrift store a few years ago, so I'm going to see if I can salvage parts of it for something else. If not, it wasn't too big of a waste. You know, you win some, you lose some. So that is all of the patterns that I can think of that I used this summer. I feel like I really succeeded at the new goal that I added to my Sew Your Stash challenge. Really happy with everything. I cannot wait to make more of my patterns. I'm hoping to make some 1940s inspired shirts, probably not from this pattern, but I do have some reproduction patterns such as This one that I'm hoping to use, I want to use View C down here. So hopefully that's coming up, and then I have a couple other ones that I'm wanting to do. So lots and lots of fun garment sewing. And yeah, I've obviously sewn some other things for my stash and everything, because you see tutorials and stuff all the time on here. But those are the notable projects that work toward my new goal in the challenge. So like I said earlier, I do have all of these Sew Your Stash videos in a playlist. I will link it right over here to the side. And then below that is my wrap up for last year's challenge. And until next time, happy sewing.